Our next panel is about taking cities to the next level. And I can't think of a more perfect place to be having this discussion. We were speaking off stage, and I was saying to the gentleman that I have only been to Qatar once, and that was in 2009, and things have really changed a lot since then. In fact, there are whole new cities. Where we are right now, Lusail didn't exist 10 years ago, and that is also testament, of course, to the vision of Qatar and how much activity, construction activity, has happened just in the last decade. So to that effect, Your Excellency, I would like to start with you. And a question just really about how much construction real estate activity has taken place in the last decade. Of course, in the run-up to the World Cup, that was a major event which I think accelerated the timeline of a lot of these projects. Where we are right now in terms of the real estate infrastructure you have and how best to optimize it.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu salam ala Rasulullah. First of all, I would like to welcome you all, Joumanna and Jonathan, Cindy, Steve, to Doha. And we are pleased to have you in Doha. Basically, as His Excellency the Prime Minister mentioned yesterday, and also at the session of His Excellency, the Minister of Finance, we have accelerated all of the real estate infrastructure. We built a world-class real estate infrastructure. And now we are looking to activate those real estate infrastructure, attracting the right partners, the right talent, and mix it with our nationals in order for us to improve productivity of the sector and of our nationals.
What does the activation mean in practice? What is it that you're looking for?
Basically, we do have a world-class, infrastructure built and expedited due to the catalyst of the World Cup. And now we are selective in attracting the right partnership and the right industries, something like, data centers, warehousing, and just to look where really the next phase of infrastructure demand is and utilize the current infrastructure to cater for the future demand.
And where does repurposing come into that also?
Sorry?
Repurposing.
Yeah, we are thinking about repurposing some of the infrastructure currently, and we will use the international partnership to advise and work with us to put to the best use the current infrastructure.
Jonathan, when you think about investing and building up your portfolio, what are some of the factors that you take into consideration?
Well, first of all, thank you. And thank you to His Excellency. And just to reiterate what a privilege it is to be in Doha and to be at the Economic Forum and to be able to say a few words. I think one of the things that I also first visited Doha in 2009, and I think one of the things that you see, the more and more time you spend within the region, is the benefits of long-term leadership and stability with a vision. And I think one of the great things that you want as an investor and that you're seeing within the Gulf area, in Qatar and also in the UAE is this, and obviously in Saudi as well, you're seeing the benefits of this long-term vision. We heard yesterday about His Royal Highness's vision for 2030. And I think as an investor, when you're coming in, that is really what you want to understand. You want to understand the long-term vision. You want to see transparency. You want to see rule of law so that you have comfort that in your long-term investment. One of the challenges that we see in some of the cities that we invest in the United States, we were early adopters in South Florida. And obviously everybody knows there's been a massive boom in South Florida through post the pandemic. We started investing in 2016, 2017, and just about to open one of the largest office blocks in Miami. But you see challenges that sometimes the local leadership and national leadership doesn't have the long-term vision to be able to achieve, to sustain that development. Those challenges may be in transport, they may be in education, they may be in social inclusion, they may be in sustainable design. There's many challenges that cities have to ensure that when they enjoy growth spurts, that the infrastructure keeps up with it. And one of the things you see when you look out the window in Doha, you see a vision and you see those challenges being thought about and I'm sure being overcome.
Yeah, and you talk about the opportunity, but of course it doesn't exist in a silo. You have to think about the broader macro environment. And I just wonder, more generally speaking, what sort of environment this is for real estate investing. We talk about very high interest rates. We talk about, the difficulty for financing, liquidity issues. How is that also contributing to the outlook from here?
Well, I think that if you look at the region and its development over the last 20 years, obviously in order for investment to prosper, one needs volume, one needs population growth, but you need a vibrant economy. And you're seeing these things within the region. His Excellency will be able to tell me the exact numbers, but the population growth in Qatar over the last 20 years has been quite significant. Yep. So the more that you see this growth within areas, the more that fires investments and more that gives investors the protection. When we started Cain, we believed in investing in gateway cities. It's no surprise that our largest development is in Los Angeles, in Beverly Hills. We've invested into Los Angeles, into New York, into Miami, because we believed in the underpinning stability of those gateway cities. So the more that the region can show that long-term stability and the growth, then you will see these gateway cities in the region becoming globally leading over the course of the next 20, 30 years. I'm absolutely convinced of that.
Cindy, His Excellency talked about not just real estate, but the real estate infrastructure that goes along with it as well. How important a factor is that?
The infrastructure-oriented development of real estate is going to power the next stage of growth for gateway cities. The reason is very simple. If you look at the real estate, it is easily 20 to 40% of carbon emission contributor worldwide. So when it comes to real estate, having sustainable infrastructure-oriented real estate development is key. First and foremost, how do we have sustainable waste management system, water treatment and distribution system, low carbon construction of mega development? Not only that, in the long-term operation and maintenance of the built environment, how do we drive energy efficiency? Not just using technology, but more importantly, shaping and influencing how the society view and use energy in their daily life, including down to having a very sustainable commitment towards use of resources, disposal and recycling of material and waste. This will involve also co-creation and co-innovation of ecosystem. So if you look at infrastructure and real estate, not just as a destination or as a venue, but also an enabler for people to come together to innovate, to drive social development, and to collect data, social data in terms of the usage and the impact that we are trying to drive. So the long-term planning, design, and engineering is very important.
I hear the word data collection and a little bell goes off in my head, artificial intelligence. So let me just ask you what potential uses you see for AI in infrastructure tech?
It's a very good question because back in Asia, in Singapore, for example, we are driving AI-based energy management system. So we have a digital twin of the built environment, not just the vertical real estate, but also the horizontal infrastructure, whereby when I say digital twin, we also sensorize key components of the built environment to collect data, correlate such data with weather, with actual live traffic flow, for example, and then use algorithm-based set point to drive the equipment, machineries, and devices. So this, over time, become very scientific and data-backed. If I fast-track the movie, most nations and businesses have set commitment for net zero by 2050. So if we start collecting the data, big data in particular, having AI-based decision-making, facts-based data set, this will help catalyze innovation and investment in the right area in the long term.
So potential, a lot of use cases there. Stephen, let me turn to you as a very experienced real estate investor. Maybe let's just start with how you are seeing the opportunity right now within the region.
Well, Qatar is a very is really impressive. We were talking about it before. The land use and zoning that has occurred in this city. There's only 2 zones where high rises are. In other areas, you get a lot of flat open space. That's a zoning plan is the beginning of it. You have a large project, you want a master planner. It's clear that whoever they had who master planned here did a really good job. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just what Jonathan talked about. You want to invest behind good government, or you want to invest when you know bad government is coming out and good government's coming back in, and that's when you get chaos. And those are obviously the most distressed opportunities. But this is solid government. You know, in the United States, we have a big call on Florida. And the reason we do is that Florida reminds us of New York, beginning in the early 1990s, Giuliani, and then proceeding to Mike Bloomberg, who was as legendary a mayor as you're ever going to see out there. And that's because there was a strong compact between government and private business. You see that in Florida today, and I sense it in Qatar. I think that they obviously had an economy that was much more geared towards petrochemical and natural gas and things of that sort, and they're expanding. Tourism is up. The hotels here are magnificent. Who wouldn't come back to this region? It sits on the water. It almost reminds me, I stayed at the Four Seasons in Athens. I don't know that it's it's the wonderful city that sits on the water. So it would just seem to me like this is going to be, I think if we wake up, I remember I went to South Korea in the worst of the market, and I made the mistake of not investing there, and 10 years later I knew it. But here you almost begin to, you sense that there's this really strong leadership that wants to see this city go to the top of the list.
Yeah, but when you talk about, how you see Florida panning out, just give us a sense of how U.S. commercial real estate is doing, because that was the big theme, the last 12 to 18 months. You talk about a lot of pullback in that space. People got involved when interest rates were very low, and obviously we are in a much higher interest rate environment right now. Lots of talks about potential defaults. How do you see it?
So U.S. real estate is going to have a deflationary effect on the U.S. economy for a bit of time. Lots of people bought multifamily at 2 and 2.5% returns, financing it at sub 2 and 2.5% returns. On the other hand, the macro is really strong. KKR just came out with a report today with a major call on multifamily in the United States because we're massively undersupplied on multifamily. And why? Because high interest rates lead to lack of construction activity. And that's the greatest environment for people like me and Jonathan. We follow what construction activity is out there. For instance, in the hospitality business, everybody knows that you get double-digit RevPAR increases when you haven't seen much construction in that area. Well, there hasn't been much construction out there in the United States in the last couple of years because of high rates. So I think there's some really interesting opportunities out there, but you have to pick the areas where you want to be. And it goes back to what this panel was talking about, which is transparency. I think when you get these over-regulated environments, when people become afraid of going into areas where you're going to see potential for rent control, things of that sort, that sort of militates against long-term certainty. And real estate is a long-term business.
Yeah, that leads me nicely to my next topic, which is, Your Excellency, you're head of a new authority that was set up this year. Its purpose was to ultimately be the regulatory authority for real estate within Qatar. What are some of the plans and initiatives that you're introducing to optimize the stated purpose of activating real estate over here?
Under the leadership of His Highness the Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad, the Qatar Real Estate Authority was established 2023. And again, I agree 100% with what Steve was saying. Transparency, we have it as a big topic that we would like to achieve in terms of availability of information for investors and utilizing a digital platform where you could access all of the available information, reliable information for investor or stakeholders in order for you to make a very accurate decision for your investment. And again, I couldn't agree more that leadership of this country is the key enabler for the business and for what we see right now. Joumanna, you said you came 2009. I will let you speak. How do you see it different in 2024?
I mean, it's entirely different.
It's a new city.
The new city, hence the name of the panel.
So for us, we are not just a regulator to add a burden for investor, but we are a partner with the private sector, enabler, and try to overcome all of the obstacles in order for businesses to get the right messages, the right processes, and also some of the key initiatives we are trying to introduce in 2024 is the dispute resolution mechanism, whereby we want the system to be clear for FDIs and international businesses. When they come to Doha, they know that they will get world-class standard in terms of infrastructure and all of the ecosystem associated with the real estate. So this is basically, we have a big ambition, and we know we will reach there, and we are your partner in Doha for the real estate market.
Jonathan, earlier on you were talking about the importance of having a long-term vision in place, and that's obviously something that benefits this part of the world. But His Excellency brought up a couple of points on what they're trying to achieve with the real estate authority. Number one, transparency, and number two, a legal framework. How important is it to have the right framework in place in order for investors to feel comfortable that this is where they want to be, not just over the short term, but these are very long-term plans?
As a born Englishman, obviously, the English-based rule of law has been one of its greatest assets as a country over decades. Its legal system has given people stability around the world, and it's enabled people to go around the world and make investments based upon a common set of rules and understanding. And there are countries in the world where you feel less comfortable investing because you don't know if you're going to wake up the next day on the back end of a ruling which negates your investment. So I think one of the great strengths that you're seeing in the region, and you're seeing, multiple industries and people and brands and in hospitality and in sports and in various so many areas coming into the region, is because people feel that level of stability within the region. We're investors in the Oman Group, obviously big players in the region, but big investments into Saudi, for example. We're also partners with Accor and the Delano, which is opening in Dubai, and looking for other areas in the region. Your Excellency, if there are others available, and so on and so forth. As we grow into the region, so we're beginning more and more comfortable to have investments, seeing the stability that in the region to enable us to make those investments and be comfortable that we're in the right place.
Do you worry about the geopolitical headwinds currently?
Look, I heard the Prime Minister speak yesterday, and I admire the way that he addressed the issue within the region. He talked about the need for alignment of interests in ensuring that as soon as possible there is a ceasefire, and ensuring as soon as possible, aligned with that there is a release of the hostages. And I think that everybody hopes across the region for peace across the region. There is no benefit to anybody in the bloodshed that people are seeing. So I think that the current environment, both in the Middle East and also obviously in Europe with Ukraine, is a negative drag on many people who wish to focus on prosperity for their families and peace amongst people. And I think every morning when we wake up, we all pray that during the course of that day or that week, that's where we end up, because it serves nobody's purpose for this endless spiral of murder and blame and counter-blame, which has been going on for the entirety of our lifetimes.
Inshallah, we say in Arabic. Cindy, let me turn to you. You spoke we spoke earlier about infrastructure tech, about artificial intelligence, sustainability, a big theme, of course, in planning and real estate visions. How can you square up sustainable projects with projects at scale?
The function of government, public administration, as well as champion companies is to improve the quality of lives, living environment, and livelihood. To drive this, you need large-scale, needle-moving, long-term projects that can't be undertaken by a single company or a single department. So it's an ecosystem approach. So one good example would be the procurement model of the government when tenders are called for long-term, large-scale project, possibly can attract more innovators, diverse pool of capital and know-how by shaping the procurement model to that of a public-private partnership. Now, in order to do that, this further reinforces what His Excellency has said earlier. To attract FDI to participate in PPP projects, you need clear, rule-based, contractual, commercial terms that people can bank on. The projects and endeavor should be bankable, that you can deploy and attract global capital. So not just capital within GCC or capital within some private equity. To me, that is the key.
Stephen, let me ask you a very simple question. Regulation, friend or foe for the industry?
Well, you need rules of the road. That's important. But it can kill the industry. It can. I mean, you're seeing, there's been things, just as an example, there are things that have happened in New York that with rent control, and so plenty of owners have lost value on apartment buildings that they own there. And these are, you know, this is not me taking a shot at New York. It's just a fact. You read about it in the paper. But everybody thinks to themselves when they hear about this, oh, so the value has come down a little bit. But that's not where the big issue is. It's a metastasizing issue, where the banks say, I don't know how to underwrite that market anymore. It used to be that we just had to underwrite where real estate taxes were going to go if they got reassessed. But now we have to underwrite whether you're going to have rent-controlled tenants living in those buildings, and it's going to be a retroactive type of regulation. If we have that, and it can't survive a constitutional challenge, we don't want to lend in that market anymore. And everybody knows in the business that the beginning of bad deals is the beginning of no liquidity in the marketplace. So no liquidity, no bank debt, the bank's getting nervous, that's the end of it. You don't see that in the markets that we're investing in today. And real good distressed buyers, and we think we do that pretty well, but you know, at those particular times, they're looking for signals of overregulation. That's where you really see your best sort of chaotic opportunities, but it's not for the faint-hearted.
Well, we're starting from a very different perspective in the case of Qatar. I'm going to give you the final word, Your Excellency. I don't know if you would like to respond to Stephen, but then also, because we're having a panel about taking cities to the next level, let me just ask you to describe to us what the future of Qatar looks like in your view if you're successful with the real estate repurposing and activation that you talked about.
Actually, just to comment on what Steve was saying, I agree that over-regulation will kill any project. And it's not what we are planning or intending to do here in Qatar. Basically, we started with a public consultation, all the private sector, before enforcing any of the laws, and taking all of the feedback, comments from the stakeholders, trying to understand their concerns before implementing any of the laws. That's why you might find us a little bit slower than what we wanted to initiate, but it's planned to get everybody's feedback and comments, not to be seen as a hurdle in the market, but an enabler to the market, and to assist and to overcome the obstacles in the market. Also, I would like just to announce that we do have a real estate forum which is coming up in October, and I invite you all to attend that forum, which will be 13th, 14th of October, and there will be all of our regulations, standards, and announcements will be officially launched at that venue. Plus, it will be followed by an event whereby you could look at the real estate opportunities in Qatar. Again, Joumanna, you told me about the future. 2009 and 2024, you are surprised. Come after 15 years, and I'm sure you will be amazed. This is my...
Is that an invitation?
Yeah. If you are now surprised, in after 15 years, you will be amazed. This is my message to all of you.
That's a good place to leave it. Thank you, gentlemen, Your Excellency, Cindy, for your time.
Thank you.